Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley. Thanks for stopping by today. I am super excited to be here on the W+9 blog with a guest post. These cards are all about the layers. There's lots and lots of layers. There's layers in the stamping, there's layers in the die cutting, and these make for some really fun and dimensional cards. Now, keep in mind, these are maybe not the most ideal cards to mail, but they're great for hand delivering. And you can always make these with a little less dimension than what I'm making them by adding less foam tape. But I just think it's fun to have all that dimension and all these layers going on these cards. So I'm going to start these cards out by cutting out this Label Layers 2 die from the natural wafer board that's in the W+9 shop. This is a really great chipboard. It cuts super easily. I die cut it using my regular die cutting sandwich. I didn't have to add any shims and it cut just beautifully. And then I'm going to take and add a little bit of gold detailing around the edge of that. And what I've done is I've just tapped my Versamark ink pad around the edge of that die cut and then added some rich pale gold embossing powder to that Versamark ink and then heat set that. And that's just going to add a little bit of pop to those edges. You could also do it with a darker ink, but if you know me at all, I got to have my gold. So that's just what I did here. And don't worry, there's plenty more gold to come. So now it's time to stamp my wreath. And this is from the Woodland Wreaths die set, or stamp set, I'm sorry. And I'm starting out by stamping that kind of twiggy layer in the warm wool ink from W+9. So I'm using my mini MISTI so that I could layer these up really easily, but these stamps are really forgiving as far as the layering is concerned. So you wouldn't have to use a MISTI or a stamp positioning tool in order to stamp these. I just like to. So I'm stamping it here on some like natural vanilla kind of ivory cardstock, but I ended up re-stamping these on some Neenah Solar white cardstock. I just liked the pop of the white a little bit more. And I kind of changed directions a lot in this card as far as my coloring was concerned. I knew what I wanted to do as far as layout, but I was having a hard time with what colors I wanted to use where. So I stamped the second layer of that wreath in the Last Leaf die ink from W+9, and now I'm doing the berry layer, and I'm using the Gala Red ink from W+9. Now, this wasn't quite as red as I wanted it to be or as intense against that green. So what I did was I just re-inked that stamp and then stamped it right back in the same place to kind of intensify that red. Now, what I didn't realize when I was stamping this was that the die is not see-through, so that's okay. It can totally work. All I've done is just taken and I've cut this die out from some scrap Neenah Solar white cardstock. With that, I aligned the die cut in that, or the negative space, around the wreath where it goes, and then I just put my wreath die into that space, kind of clicks in like a little puzzle piece, and now I'm going to run it through my die cut machine, and that will get me a perfect cut around this die cut where the die is not quite see-through or hollow. Now, you'll see me cutting out that Mary sentiment over there as well. This is where I'm telling you that I had a hard time with what colors I wanted to use. So I have it cut out over there. I used the Be Mary stamp set for that, but I've decided I wanted to just re-stamp it on some vellum and emboss it with that rich pale gold embossing powder. So I prepped the surface of my vellum using my EK Success powder tool. I stamped the stamp, that beautiful, gorgeous sentiment stamp, onto that vellum. I added my rich pale gold embossing powder and then I heat set it. And then I die cut it out with the coordinating die as well. Now, for the second version of this card, I wanted to use that beautiful banner that's a part of the Be Mary Stamp and Die combo set. So what I did was I cut it out of the natural wafer board. I went ahead and stamped the detailing part around the edge of that banner. There's like a little dot detailing that goes around, and I embossed that onto the banner. And now I'm stamping the sentiment into the middle of that area. I stamped it with some Versamark ink and I used my MISTI to kind of line it up there. And then I'm going to very awkwardly cross my arms and heat set that embossing powder. I used a super fine detail white embossing powder, but you're going to see there, I actually switched to gold. So like I said, this was all over the place as far as my coloring was concerned for embossing and that sort of thing, but I always knew what I wanted to do as far as layout was concerned. So I've taken this smaller image, this is from the Woodland Wreaths die set, and I've cut it out of some Neenah Solar white cardstock, and now I am using the Last Leaf die ink to stamp the stamped images on top of it. I just wanted some sprigs of greenery greenery that I could just kind of have peeking out from behind the sentiments and just kind of, I don't know. I just wanted it. So sometimes I don't always have a reason. I just felt like it needed it. So I'm going to add it. And I'm going to get these all ready to assemble by adding some foam tape to the back of all of these pieces. So I added foam tape to the back of my label layer. I added foam tape to the back of my wreath. And I also added foam tape to the back of my banners and my sentiments as well. So like I said, if you wanted to cut down on the dimension of these cards, you could use some Stamp Runner adhesive or some just regular liquid adhesive, whatever it is that you use that's not dimensional, and that would take a little bit of the bulk out of these cards. But remember, I'm just all about the layers today. So on these card fronts, I have some white linen card base or card fronts here, and I added a strip of the We Are Memory Keepers Shape and Tape. It's a black and white washi sheet that you can cut down into strips. So I've cut a 1/4-inch strip, and I've used my grid mat to help me align it onto that stitched rectangle card front that I've created there. And now I am just going to start assembling these up. So I'm adding my label layer there first, and now I'm adding my wreath. Now, when I added the foam tape to this wreath, I added 2 layers of foam adhesive on the back side of that right side that hangs off of that label layer so that it would sit nice and flat across there. And now I'm going to add my vellum sentiment, and I'm adding this with a little bit of the Cool Tack clear foam adhesive. I've cut down several little squares there, and I've just kind of hidden it the best that I could behind the embossing that's there on the vellum. And then I'm going to take these little sprigs here that I die cut and stamped, and I'm going to tuck them behind this vellum sentiment to where they're just kind of peeking out. I just thought it added a nice fun touch. It kind of kept it from being too like straight up symmetrical. I don't know. I just liked it. So now I'm going to go ahead and put together the second card, and I'm putting it together much in the same way that I did the first card. I've cut a second banner out of some red cardstock, and I've applied it to my card first, and then I'm adding the stamped embossed version over the top of that and just slightly offsetting it so that it kind of pops off of that wreath a little bit more. That red just kind of gave it a little pop so that it didn't blend too much into the label layer that was there in the background and the natural colors of the wreath as well. So I'm going to finish these wreaths off with some red gems. I just have had these in my stash forever. You could use rhinestones, you could use enamel accents, you could use pearls and color them red with your Copic markers. You could do whatever you want, or you could leave them alone. Or Stickles glitter glue is always a winner in my book. So you could make some sparkly little berries on top of what's already stamped there. So for the non-holiday version of this card, I am using the Freehand Floral stamp set. Now, I think I watched a video on Dawn's YouTube channel that showed how to stamp these up properly, and I think you're supposed to die cut them first, but I don't always play by the rules, so I'm just doing my own thing here. And it did kind of cause a problem when I went to die cut them, but you're gonna see it's gonna turn out just fine. So I've stamped those up. I'm going to end up using the Flamingo and the Sweet Nectar colors from these. I'm also going to stamp the leaves, several of these leaves from this stamp set as well, and I'm using the Last Leaf die ink for that. And now I'm going to put my die over the top of these and cut these out. So I've cut several of them, both the larger and the smaller flowers as well as the leaves. And you can see here, I'm having a hard time lining this up. It's okay. It all worked out in the end. I'm layering them up over each other, so some of those edges that are more white than others don't really show. And it didn't really bother me because I really like the imperfection or the not perfectly die cut and not perfectly stamped feel of these florals. So I'm just going with the messy feel on these. In fact, the embossing isn't perfect either. And what I'm doing is I'm just adding a little bit of gold to these florals. I stamped like the middle layer of these layered stamped images onto the center of this more solid version that I had created earlier. And I added some of that rich pale gold embossing powder to those as well. And my embossing isn't perfect, and there's kind of some overflow or some flecks that don't belong. They're not stuck to the stamping, so they're kind of imperfect. But I was okay with that because I felt like it added just kind of like this I don't know, imperfect. It added to the imperfect nature of these flowers. And I wasn't going for perfection on these. I wanted them to feel very free and very loose as the design of the stamp set suggests. So I've gone ahead and I've added my label layer 2 to this with the washi tape in the background. And now I'm just layering up these florals. I've added some on with 1 layer of foam tape, some on with 2 layers of foam tape, and some flat against that label layer there or the card base. And now, once again, I am using that banner die from the Be Merry stamp set or the die set as well. And I've gone ahead and I've embossed the gold around the edges of that banner. And now I'm using this Hello die cut from the Bountiful Blooms die set. I've cut it out of some black licorice twist cardstock, and I'm applying it to that banner using a little liquid glue, the Zig 2-way glue pen. And I'm going to finish these flowers off with just a few clear gems as well. And I did add a layer of glossy accents over that Hello die cut to make it really shine and add some dimension. So here's a look at my finished card projects today. I took and I added layer upon layer, both in the stamping and the die cutting for these cards. It makes them really pop. There's lots of dimension, and I am just so pleased with the way these turned out. Now, keep in mind, I also took the same layout and I created a non-holiday card using the freehand florals instead of the wreaths, the woodland wreaths for this card here. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you make a card. Sometimes you find a layout that just works for you and you just go with it. And that's kind of what I did with these cards today. Thanks for stopping by today. I really hope you enjoyed these projects. As always, there will be links to all of the products used in these projects in the description below at YouTube. Thanks, Dawn, for having me on your blog today. Thanks for letting me take over. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.